kind of leading up to that, I guess, you know, the team needed to be sold, or you were looking to sell it. That kind of period of time, you were obviously looking for the right buyer, right? That was a big part. I remember you saying that quite a few times from the kind of TV and media stuff.
Yeah.
That process must have been a very difficult 6 months, of course. But what were you looking for in the right buyer when you said that?
Good, you just triggered a memory. I remember when I used to go to the press conferences, and for those awful press conferences, the team was to go. And for some reason,
when you're sat on the stages.
Yeah. For some reason, there was always the question, in like 2018, I think, I was always asked, are you selling the team? Are you selling the team? There were always rumours circulating. And at that point, there was no way that it would have entered my head. No, I used
it just
to get
came from
really angry about it.
Really?
You know, the for sales. I think my stock answer whenever do you see a for sale sign outside our motorhome? You know, because it just used to really tick me off. It was like, come on, can we stop asking this question? This team is not for sale and it never will be. But then obviously we did have to put it up for sale in 2020. So you just reminded me of that.
It must be frustrating because that was obviously a time where you're struggling with some day-to-day stuff. The team's trying to keep going forward and keep moving upwards. And it's amazing how little comments like that can just trigger, because why wouldn't you? So you're going through some really hard stuff.
Exactly. Just because you're going through hard stuff, it doesn't mean you're going to put the for sale sign outside.
I mean, there was a team recently with all the rumours around that in Formula One where, you know, they were struggling, and it's the first thing that kind of comes up. It's just that thing, isn't it?
Which is odd, because Formula One people, anyone in a team, anyone running a team, they don't have the mentality of, oh, well, it's a bit hard now, we'll give up. You know, the mentality doesn't even enter a Formula One person's head.
Yeah.
So for a journalist to think, oh, well, times are hard, they're going to sell, it's quite weird.
Do you think it was, though, because you weren't backed by a manufacturer?
Yeah. And
is that the reason why you think that kind of was more rearing its head?
I think so. And the sport was really changing.
Right.
We were going through this massive regulation overhaul as well. And, you know, the budgets were just crazy at the time. I mean, just to give some perspective, from 2018 onwards, teams at the upper end of the grid were spending close to $500 million to go racing a year. $500 million. And there was no cap. There was no control on what teams were allowed to spend. The more money they had, the more money they were putting in. And so the teams that didn't have that, you know, the support of a car manufacturer or a major drinks brand, you know, the independent teams in Formula One like mine and my family's that relied on prize fund money and sponsorship alone, we all know back in 2015, 16, brands were not falling over themselves to sponsor, certainly not sponsor Formula One teams, unlike they are today. Yeah, we were scrabbling, trying to secure 60 million in sponsorship, and prize fund money, you know, was not at the level. It's gone up a bit now, courtesy of the new regulations. But when you are trying to compete against teams that can spend twice as much as you, how on earth are you able to compete? It was nigh on impossibility. Yes, I will hold my hands up. We had other issues that we weren't doing things right.
Sure.
But the external factors were really causing us major headaches that were almost, they were not creating a playing field that was level from the off. You know, any sport should always have a playing field for its competitors that is level at the outset. When it's not, like it wasn't in Formula One at the time, how then can teams like Williams compete? How can they compete? How can they thrive? You know, they are looking at survival at that point. And that's what we were facing down a barrel of a gun going into 2020. We had a number of factors just all came and conspired against us. So we had our title sponsor that didn't pay their bill. And when you've got a gap that, you know, you can imagine how much money a title sponsor pays when it is that big a percentage of your budget and you're going into the following racing year without it, you know, what do you do? So fortunately, we were able to plug that gap. But then COVID came and we didn't go racing. And when you don't go racing, you don't get paid. And so that was, you know, we up until that point managed to keep the lights on for a really long time in what were very difficult circumstances. And then it was game over. It was the final nail in the coffin, unfortunately, COVID. I never would have thought that would have been the demise of the Williams family in Formula One, but it was. It
was a difficult time. I think when you kind of first announced it, especially in a lot of interviews, you were definitely leaning on it being your decision in terms of you made that leading decision to make that move. Did that take you quite a long time to obviously make it, but then actually fully press the button? I imagine it's not as simple as like walking into your senior team and saying, right, this is what we're doing. It's quite a process that happens behind the scenes and very emotional as well.
Yeah.
So, for you, was there a moment where you kind of knew, right, we're going to have to look for, someone's purchased the team, that period of time? Do you remember that, or it must be a bit of a blur?
So it was really hard at the time because that was COVID.
Right.
COVID had literally just hit.
In March 2020 and what? Yeah.
We were in Australia. We'd gone to the Grand Prix.
Of course, yeah.
And that was the most extraordinary race weekend because we'd made it to Australia as a team. We'd heard about COVID, and going, I think probably for the week or so ahead, it was like, should we really be going? This is all getting really close now. But obviously Formula One made the decision that the race was going to go ahead. We all flew to Australia. And then I flew in, I got in on Thursday morning, went to the circuit. It was everyone wasn't really doing very much, keeping themselves to themselves, having these powwows in their motorhomes. And then I went out for dinner with my husband that night, and we got back and I was like, oh, thank God, I can go to bed now, get ready for practice the next day. I was really boring when I liked early nights. And I got a phone call, probably just as I turned out the light, saying we're having a team principals meeting downstairs in wherever it was, the hotel we were staying in half an hour. I mean, I'm in my pajamas, taking my makeup off. This is why it's so hard being a woman in business, because all the other team principals, if they had been in bed, just chuck on a pair of jeans and go downstairs. I'm there and I'm like, really? Do I want the world to see this? So anyway, went downstairs and we're, all the TPs are there with F1, with and saying, are we racing? Are we not racing? And there was a big hoo-ha. And some people did, some people didn't.
Because as unfortunately what happened to you, it's a big deal to just not go racing. It's not just the entertainment and we want to win the constructors this year or whatever. We want more money. It's for some of you, it was in order to survive. We need to know what we're doing.
Yeah, exactly. And so for me, I'm sat there. And I've kind of got people, the camp that want to go home shouting at me, the camp that want to stay shouting at me, and the arguments, for the camp that wants to stay, well, what would your father do? He's a racer. We'd go racing under any circumstances. That's what you should do. And there's half of me that's, we're racers. We go racing. Yeah. And then there's the other half that's, I've got, 150 people here that I've got to keep safe. And that's my priority as well. I want to get them home before they close borders. So what do I do? But then I've got the money issue. If we don't go racing, if I pull my team and yet there's still a race on Sunday, I'm losing $20 million and I've just lost more than $20 million in sponsorship. It's
an impossible decision.
It is so impossible. Yeah. But anyway, we all agreed, let's do practice in the morning. Let's see what tomorrow brings, because it was so fast moving at this pace. Anyway, so I go back to bed. And at 4 a.m, my phone rings going, when we've decided we're not racing. So a few of them had stayed back, I think, and had decided for everybody that we weren't going to race. So we had to go into the circuit the next day. And I remember I'd been given some crates to stand on because I don't have a platform. I'm so small. I stepped up on some beer box or something. I had to tell my team we're going. Thanks for turning up for a day, and we're leaving. And so that night I was on a flight home, having been in Australia for about 12 hours, and then on a flight back, and then having to deal with our business in COVID.
I was going to say, because you're going back not to furlough everyone and kind of chill, you're going back to work out where the business is going to go from there.
It was how... Are we still running? Is the business still open? If it's not, how on earth do we pay people when we haven't got money coming? Well, anyway, I mean,
the complexities of it must be so
every
much.
Business leader in that time had, I think, the hardest decisions, or trying to get an understanding of what the art of the possible was so difficult. Yeah. And to have to do it all remotely, not to be able to see anyone. I went out and bought one of those big clunky old conference phones because really Zoom and Teams hadn't taken off at that point. It was like, how am I going to do any of these calls when I got to dial in 16 people? Yeah. It was really hard. I mean, it was hard for everybody. And then, we had these team principal Zoom calls. I've still got a photograph from the first one we ever had. It's brilliant. But we're there and we're going, what on earth are we going to do? Trying to should we just go and race in Zandvoort because Red Bull can make that safe for us and we'll just have the whole championship there. That was on the table. All these scenarios. But then we'd kind of, I suppose, got through this COVID point, but then and understood what we were going to do as a business. But then it quickly became apparent as COVID kept happening and we weren't going to go racing again for a good few months that that was going to be it. And I think it was actually my board said, this is it. You've got to make that decision that it's game over, unfortunately. And so that was where that decision came from. But at the time, obviously, I then had to go, right, well, how do we sell a team in COVID? How do we do that? And how do we sell one of the greatest legacy teams in Formula One when it's in the position that it's in COVID? All the while, at this time as well, I was clearly still trying to run the business and the team. And we were still negotiating the final regulations for 2021. And that was 3 years worth of work that we were trying to finalise and then figure out how we were going to get to go racing again. And then finally figure out how we were going to sell the team. I mean, it was an absolute mind boggle, put it like that.
I mean, I think the actual selling of the team is pretty well documented, in terms of the process you went through. And I mean, what you just described there sounds like so much stress and pressure that you must have had on your shoulders, sorry.
Well, I was going to when we did finally get to going racing, I'd be a day at the track and then I would come back to the hotel because obviously I was in team kit. I'd have to change into business kit and get on a Zoom call with prospective buyers. And the presentation process normally took 3 hours at a time. And I would be leading it, doing most of the talking. So I'd been at the track for all of the day and I'd have to come and do these presentations. And sometimes I would be doing 2 or 3 in an evening and then have to go back to the track the next day. Yeah. And then I'd be sitting there having to sell my team, like, please buy my team. And then in my heart going, why am I doing this? This is absolutely
was there a lot of that
hideous. Yeah, it was awful.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I didn't want to sell. No. Of course I didn't. No. I had lovely, fantasies about Williams going into the third generation of Williamses, my son or my nephew or niece running the team. And, that was always my plan for the team. And I never even contemplated that wouldn't happen, I suppose, because Williams had been around forever. So why wasn't it going to continue to be around forever? And it all came really quickly.
Brilliant. 6 months is not a long time, is it? No. That's kind of the period of time.
Exactly. I thought kind of when I'd secured the money to replace the Rocket money, the title sponsor that we lost, I thought that was kind of it. We were okay. We were going to be okay. Because my dad had always been okay. He'd always taught me, someone will come. My mum was the one that panicked over the winter about, we got the budget to go racing, Frank, and be panicked that we wouldn't. And my dad would always be just like, something will come along, Virginia, don't you worry about it. So I'd inherited that. I had CFOs that would be panicked. My CEO would be like, oh my God, this is a disaster. What we're going to do in November every year. Something will come along, and it always did. And so something did come along. We were very lucky that someone kind of came and bailed us out at the start of that year. And then, COVID did hit and that killed us.
Was there a possibility where you could have stayed involved in the team at all?
Yeah, they the new owners did kind of throw that around. Yeah, quite quietly. I didn't know whether they were convinced by that when they said it, whether they were just saying it to be nice. I don't know. Yeah. But I was quite clear that was not the path that I wanted to go down. I was very resolute about that. When I look back now, I think, oh gosh, was that the right decision? It would be quite fun to run the team with someone else's money. Why did I have to worry about it? Yeah. What one idiot. Why didn't I accept that? What I think if I'm honest, what I was most concerned about was that they would fire me after 6 months and I wanted to go out on my own terms.
Fair enough.